Hi, guys. Today's lesson is on the Nuremberg Trials. These are our overview notes. You do definitely have to take notes on these. You are going to be sending me these notes at the end of today. You can either take a picture of your written notes or you can type them right into a Google Doc and turn it in to Google Classroom that way. This is stuff that we're going to be referring back to, so you definitely want to have the notes written down, even if I wasn't collecting it. So let's get into the slideshow. Okay. So the Nuremberg trials, we know, are the trials that were set up by the Allies at the end of World War II, mostly to try the Nazi soldiers, doctors, leaders in dealing with the Holocaust. Okay. So at the Yalta Conference in 1945, the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union agreed to accept an unconditional German surrender. They would be demilitarized and divided into Allied occupied zones. All traces of the Nazi Party would be removed from Germany, and it would just become a democratic republic. As we're going through this, if you need to stop so that you can write this down, click pause and then start up again when you're done. Okay. Dealing with the Nazis at the Potsdam Conference, also in 1945, the German territories were captured, were returned to their pre-war status. Poland became Poland, Czechoslovakia went back to being Czechoslovakia, and so on and so forth. Germany would be demilitarized, the Nazi Party wiped out. Austria and Germany would be divided into allied zones of military occupation, meaning they weren't actually allowed to occupy their own government unless it was under one of the allies' protection, so to speak. All German potential industrial means for militaristic production was to be dismantled. We talked about demilitarization before. If you can't have weapons, you can't build any new ones. Okay. All right. So this is Germany. This is what it was to become. We have the British zone in the north, the American and French zones in the south, and then the Russian zone in the east. The Nuremberg trials of major war criminals prosecuted 24 of the most important captured leaders. Now, not included were three of the most important, so to speak. Hitler, his SS chief Himmler, they committed suicide to stop from being captured. So the trials, were held in Nuremberg, which would be why they're called the Nuremberg trials. All right. So the Allied leaders put surviving Nazi leaders on trial for crimes against humanity. This was kind of a new statement. We're going to talk about exactly what this means later on this week and into next week. But the individuals were held responsible for their crimes, even when they were committed with government authority in times of war. Over the next week, we're going to be talking about who can be held responsible in situations like this. Is it the people who were just doing their jobs, or was it the people giving the orders? Many of the Nazis tried to defend themselves by claiming that they were only following orders. Okay, here are some quotes by these guys. Don't let anybody tell you that they had no idea. Everybody sensed there was something horribly wrong with the system. That's from a Nazi governor. And then this other guy, Rudolf Hess, it's just incomprehensible how these things came about. Every genius has the demon in him. You can't blame him. It's just in him. Everybody obviously makes choices when it comes to stuff like this. And what he's saying is that, well, he just did it because he wanted to. All right. Again, if you want to read the quote, you can go back and read that one. Okay. The trial proceedings created three new ideas within the jurisdiction of the Nuremberg Tribunal. And the first one was crimes against peace, anything that was planning, preparation, or initiation of waging war, war crimes, which is violations of the laws of war, and then crimes against humanity, which was a new thing at this time. Nobody had ever been tried for this. Murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against any civilian population. In this instance, we're talking specifically about the Holocaust. The term genocide was coined in 1944 as a response to the Holocaust, and we'll talk next week about how that definition came about and how it has even changed over time since then. All right. The sentencing took place at Nuremberg because of the historical significance of the Nuremberg laws. 12 officials were sentenced to death by hanging, two committed suicide, seven served prison sentences, and then two were acquitted of all charges. Here's just a picture of what the Nuremberg tribunals looked like. Basically, a tribunal is when you don't have one judge. They had one judge from each of the four allied superpowers. So there was one tribunal judge from the United States, one from the Soviet Union, one from the United Kingdom, and one from France. Okay. Subsequent trials that came about because of that were the justices' trials and the doctors' trials. They put Nazi doctors on trial for performing unethical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. 16 of the 23 doctors put on trial were sentenced, seven were put to death, and the rest were imprisoned. Noticeably absent was Joseph Mengele, who was the head Nazi physician at Auschwitz. He was never brought to trial. The justices' trial were Nazi judges for enforcing and upholding the unjust laws of the Third Reich, allowing for the Holocaust to happen. The defendants did not have any say in the selection of the judges and could not appeal the appointment. So it wasn't, they criticized it as not being like a fair trial, so to speak. Although, again, fair is relative. We're talking about the killing of 11 million people. Defendants were prosecuted for charges that had never been before legally defined. Again, crimes against humanity. And they claimed that the charges were created after they were committed, which technically, you're not supposed to do. The Allies were accused of being as guilty of certain war crimes as the Nazis they put on trial, which is entirely an acceptable opinion. The Soviets committed atrocities against Eastern European nations they occupied, launched aggressive war. United States interned thousands of innocent Japanese Americans when they starting in the Japanese internment camps in the Southwest. And then the dropping of the atomic bombs could certainly be considered war crimes or crimes against humanity as well. All right. These are just quotes. It's a political trial by the victors and will be a good thing when Germany realizes that. Again, notice none of the losers were a part of the tribunals except on the receiving end. All right, so the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949 cements the legacy of the Nuremberg Trials. They set forth the rules governing how warring nations must treat civilians, granted protection to civilians whose nations were occupied militarily, whether or not by force. It extended protection to prisoners of war and surrendering soldiers, and also edited language of the other three previous Geneva Conventions to standardize the laws of war. Again, now that we have war crimes, crimes of peace, and then crimes against humanity, we can now add those in. The Nuremberg Principles were created in 1950, which created the official definition of war crimes as based on Nuremberg for all future military interactions. And then the Nuremberg codes establish a medical code of ethics dealing with scientific experiments. You can't just experiment on people just because you're holding them hostage or prisoner. All right, so these are the three things that you need to focus on for the next few days. These key questions say, are there rules for war? We know that there are, okay, but what kind of rules are there? Who should enforce them? Who gets to decide whether or not you're committing a war crime? And then what happens if you break them? Because like the German soldiers quoted in the, presentation said, if you're the winner, you get to decide who breaks them. But if you're the loser, it is what it is, you know? So again, keep those three questions in mind. Those will be a part of our assignments for the next